The first days under her management felt completely ordinary, almost routine. The office had its usual hum of computers, soft chatter, and the occasional ring of phones. But amidst this, she stood out. 42 years old, an American Caucasian woman with long black hair that fell gracefully past her shoulders. Her presence was commanding without ever being harsh, and she moved through the office with a poise that seemed effortless. Her lightly tanned skin caught the morning light as she greeted her team, subtle freckles visible on her cheeks, soft laugh lines around her dark brown eyes, a graceful posture that exuded confidence. He noticed her professionalism immediately. Instructions were clear, expectations high, yet she had a warmth that softened every interaction. She wore tailored business attire, blouses that hinted at elegance without being distracting, skirts that matched her sophisticated demeanor. But it wasn't just her appearance. It was the way she acknowledged each team member, the way she listened fully when someone spoke, the gentle nods that made even the most nervous employees feel seen. He, a 22-year-old junior employee, felt both admiration and a quiet sense of intimidation. Their initial interactions were entirely professional. She would explain tasks carefully, correct mistakes politely, and offer encouragement with a soft smile that revealed subtle freckles and the faintest curve of her lips. Yet, amidst these ordinary exchanges, he began noticing details he couldn't quite ignore. The way her hand lingered fractionally on a report as she passed it to him. The tilt of her head when she listened, attentive and deliberate. The warmth in her eyes, which seemed to study him beyond the surface, reading his hesitation or curiosity. He felt an odd flutter, a mix of nervousness and intrigue, that surprised him. Even small gestures, like guiding his posture during a presentation or standing slightly closer than necessary to explain a chart, began to carry an unexpected weight. Her presence had a calm, grounding effect, yet it also stirred a quiet tension in him. He became hyper-aware of her subtle laugh lines, the curve of her shoulders, the mature confidence that made her both approachable and untouchable. Every morning when she passed by his desk with a polite nod or a simple good morning, he felt a pang of anticipation, a curiosity that he struggled to name. Key here is the foundation. Their relationship starts entirely professional, but the seeds of attraction, admiration, and subtle awareness are planted through small, sensory-rich details. He notices not just her beauty but the way she interacts with the world, her confident gestures, and the quiet attentiveness that sets her apart from anyone he's ever known. The goal of this keynote is to establish respect, professionalism, and the first emotional connection while hinting at the slow-burn attraction that will grow. Every look, every gesture, every nuanced interaction adds layers to the story, creating tension, warmth, and curiosity for what might eventually blossom beyond the office walls. After several weeks under her guidance, subtle changes began to emerge in the way she interacted with him. At first, they were almost imperceptible, a slightly longer look, a softer tone when offering advice, a fleeting smile that seemed to linger just a second too long. The 42-year-old American Caucasian manager with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, and dark brown eyes began to show glimpses of warmth that went beyond simple professionalism. He noticed her gestures, once purely managerial, now carried a gentle attentiveness, as if she were quietly testing the boundaries of their connection. During meetings, she would occasionally make direct eye contact with him for a fraction longer than necessary. When passing him a stack of documents, her hand sometimes brushed his, brief and accidental, or so it seemed. He felt a shiver of awareness, a strange mix of excitement and hesitation. He began to wonder if she had always been like this or if he was simply noticing these details now, hyper-aware of every small movement. Her tailored business outfits, polished and elegant, framed a curvy figure with graceful posture, giving her an aura of confidence and maturity that was impossible to ignore. Every time she adjusted her hair or tilted her head, he felt a pull he couldn't explain, a subtle tension between admiration and attraction. Even casual conversations began to feel layered with meaning. She asked about his weekend plans or how he felt about a project, her voice warm, attentive, slightly lower in tone when addressing him than with other team members. Sometimes her hand would briefly touch his arm when emphasizing a point, a touch so light it could be written off as professional, yet it sent an unexpected thrill through him. He noticed the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled directly at him, the quiet steadiness in her posture that conveyed both authority and comfort. Each small gesture felt like a secret message, unspoken but impossible to ignore. Internally, he wrestled with his own awareness. Admiration for her professionalism mixed with a growing personal curiosity. Was this attraction? Was it just his imagination? Ethical concerns and respect for the workplace rules created a constant tension. He found himself anticipating their interactions, analyzing her gestures, and replaying brief exchanges in his mind long after they occurred. The subtle shift in her attention was intoxicating, drawing him into an emotional space where every look, every smile, every fleeting touch became charged with possibility. This keynote is all about establishing the slow burn of attraction, how a professional relationship gradually begins to feel more personal without crossing boundaries. It emphasizes emotional awareness, the small details that signal interest, and the internal conflict of a young man noticing a graceful, mature woman who seems to see him in a new light. The foundation for romantic tension is laid here, using sensory-rich descriptions: her lightly tanned skin, long black hair, dark brown eyes, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, curvy figure, graceful posture, to create intimacy and connection without breaking workplace norms. By the end of this section, the audience should feel the quiet but undeniable shift in their relationship, eager to see where these subtle gestures might lead. A late afternoon at the office brought an unusual quiet. Most of the team had left, leaving only the two of them behind to review an upcoming project. The 22-year-old junior employee noticed how different the room felt with her presence alone. She, a 42-year-old American Caucasian woman with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, and dark brown eyes, moved with the same graceful confidence as always, but there was something more intimate in her gestures now, a warmth that felt unspoken yet undeniable. Her tailored blouse and pencil skirt framed her mature, curvy figure, her posture poised yet relaxed as she leaned slightly over the table to examine the documents. The conversation began professionally, focused on deadlines, charts, and strategy. But as she explained a complex detail, her hand briefly brushed against his while pointing to a graph. The touch was fleeting, but the warmth lingered far longer than it should have. His heart raced, yet her expression remained calm, confident, and approachable. He noticed the small details, the slight crinkle of her eyes as she smiled, the way her lips parted when she laughed softly, the gentle rhythm of her voice that seemed to draw him closer. Every gesture carried a layered meaning, the kind that made him suddenly hyper-aware of her presence, her proximity, and the subtle intimacy of the moment. She paused mid-sentence, letting her gaze rest on him for a heartbeat longer than necessary, and he felt the unmistakable flutter of anticipation. The room was bright with natural afternoon light, highlighting her lightly tanned skin and the subtle freckles along her cheeks. He noticed the soft lines at the corners of her eyes, evidence of years of laughter and life, something that made her seem approachable, yet irresistibly sophisticated. He realized that these small, sensory-rich details were what made her presence so compelling. The warmth in her eyes, the grace in her movements, the quiet steadiness that radiated from her without effort. Their hands brushed again as she passed him a pen, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. He felt her skin, warm and soft, the subtle weight of her touch grounding him in a way that was both comforting and thrilling. She smiled, a slight upward curve of her lips and a glimmer in her dark brown eyes, and the world felt as if it had narrowed to just the two of them. The professional boundary remained intact, yet the emotional space between them had shifted, charged with the quiet tension that neither of them addressed aloud. This keynote emphasizes the development of quiet, intimate moments that deepen emotional connection. It highlights how small gestures, a touch, a glance, a pause, can build slow-burn romantic tension without overtly crossing professional or YouTube-safe boundaries. The narrator's sensory awareness of her curvy, graceful figure, her softly freckled skin, her mature beauty, and her confident yet vulnerable demeanor creates a compelling, emotionally rich scene. By the end of this section, the audience feels the intimacy growing, the tension thickening, and the subtle hint that their relationship is evolving beyond mere professional interaction. The first real shift in their connection came during a routine project review, yet it carried a weight neither of them could ignore. The 22-year-old junior employee had been focused on refining a presentation when she, a 42-year-old American Caucasian woman with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, and dark brown eyes, leaned over his desk to point out a minor adjustment. Her tailored blouse fell softly around her shoulders, her curvy figure framed by professional attire, her posture relaxed yet poised. The warmth of her hand resting briefly on his shoulder lingered longer than expected, a delicate contact that sparked a sudden awareness in him. Their eyes met, and for the first time, he noticed a flicker of something beyond professionalism in her gaze: curiosity, care, and perhaps a quiet recognition of mutual attraction. The room, bright with natural daylight filtering through the office windows, seemed to shrink around them. Every detail became amplified: the soft lines at the corners of her eyes, the subtle smile teasing her lips, the gentle brush of hair behind her ear. He felt a tension in his chest, a mixture of excitement, hesitation, and the thrill of noticing her on a deeper, more personal level. Conversation slowed naturally, pauses filled with unspoken acknowledgement. She asked about his approach to the project, her tone softer, yet deliberate, drawing him into a space where the professional and personal subtly intertwined. When she adjusted his posture, guiding him to point out a detail on the screen, her hand lingered fractionally longer than necessary, the warmth of her skin grounding him in an intimacy that was both exciting and unnerving. The fluttering in his chest intensified, awareness of her mature, graceful presence filling his mind with emotions he hadn't allowed himself to name before. He struggled internally, questioning the ethics of his growing awareness, the boundaries of their professional relationship, and the social implications of the attraction he felt. Yet, the magnetic pull between them was undeniable. Even the smallest gestures, a fleeting touch of her hand on a stack of documents, a momentary brush of her fingers while pointing, a shared smile at an inside joke, carried a weight far beyond their casual appearances. Her dark brown eyes, expressive and warm, seemed to communicate what words could not, and he found himself leaning into her presence, captivated by the subtle power of her mature, confident beauty. This keynote is about the first explicit acknowledgement of feelings through actions and microexpressions rather than dialogue. The goal is to show emotional complexity, hesitation, and the beginning of mutual awareness without breaking professional boundaries. Her body language, facial expressions, and the small, intentional touches build tension, deepen emotional intimacy, and signal the slow-burn nature of their connection. By the end of this section, both characters and the audience are acutely aware that the dynamic has shifted. There is a quiet but undeniable spark between them, a delicate dance of attraction, curiosity, and restrained desire that promises further development while respecting the story's YouTube-safe boundaries. The first real shift in their connection came during a routine project review, yet it carried a weight neither of them could ignore. The 22-year-old junior employee had been focused on refining a presentation when she, a 42-year-old American Caucasian woman with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, and dark brown eyes, leaned over his desk to point out a minor adjustment. Her tailored blouse fell softly around her shoulders, her curvy figure framed by professional attire, her posture relaxed yet poised. The warmth of her hand resting briefly on his shoulder lingered longer than expected, a delicate contact that sparked a sudden awareness in him. Their eyes met, and for the first time, he noticed a flicker of something beyond professionalism in her gaze: curiosity, care, and perhaps a quiet recognition of mutual attraction. The room, bright with natural daylight filtering through the office windows, seemed to shrink around them. Every detail became amplified: the soft lines at the corners of her eyes, the subtle smile teasing her lips, the gentle brush of hair behind her ear. He felt a tension in his chest, a mixture of excitement, hesitation, and the thrill of noticing her on a deeper, more personal level. Conversation slowed naturally, pauses filled with unspoken acknowledgement. She asked about his approach to the project, her tone softer, yet deliberate, drawing him into a space where the professional and personal subtly intertwined. When she adjusted his posture, guiding him to point out a detail on the screen, her hand lingered fractionally longer than necessary, the warmth of her skin grounding him in an intimacy that was both exciting and unnerving. The fluttering in his chest intensified, awareness of her mature, graceful presence filling his mind with emotions he hadn't allowed himself to name before. He struggled internally, questioning the ethics of his growing awareness, the boundaries of their professional relationship, and the social implications of the attraction he felt. Yet, the magnetic pull between them was undeniable. Even the smallest gestures, a fleeting touch of her hand on a stack of documents, a momentary brush of her fingers while pointing, a shared smile at an inside joke, carried a weight far beyond their casual appearances. Her dark brown eyes, expressive and warm, seemed to communicate what words could not, and he found himself leaning into her presence, captivated by the subtle power of her mature, confident beauty. This keynote is about the first explicit acknowledgement of feelings through actions and microexpressions rather than dialogue. The goal is to show emotional complexity, hesitation, and the beginning of mutual awareness without breaking professional boundaries. Her body language, facial expressions, and the small, intentional touches build tension, deepen emotional intimacy, and signal the slow-burn nature of their connection. By the end of this section, both characters and the audience are acutely aware that the dynamic has shifted. There is a quiet but undeniable spark between them, a delicate dance of attraction, curiosity, and restrained desire that promises further development while respecting the story's YouTube-safe boundaries. The days following that subtle acknowledgement were charged with a tension neither of them could ignore. In the bright office filled with sunlight bouncing off the glass walls, the 22-year-old junior employee found himself acutely aware of her every movement. She, a 42-year-old American Caucasian woman with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, soft laugh lines, subtle freckles, and expressive dark brown eyes, carried herself with the same graceful confidence. Yet now, every gesture seemed to carry a hidden message. Her tailored business outfits framed her curvy, mature figure, exuding elegance and authority while also emphasizing her natural allure in a way that was impossible to overlook. Small, seemingly casual interactions became emotionally loaded. A hand brushing against his as she passed a pen, a slight pause when she met his eyes, a soft laugh that lingered just a second too long. Each moment left him breathless and questioning the propriety of his thoughts. He felt a fluttering excitement mixed with guilt, the awareness of attraction clashing with respect and professional boundaries. The office felt brighter, almost charged, as if their unspoken connection illuminated every corner. During a team discussion, she made a comment that seemed directed specifically at him, though carefully veiled to remain professional. The warmth in her voice, the slight lean toward him, the subtle brush of her fingers against his arm, all conveyed a personal attentiveness that no one else in the room experienced. He caught himself stealing glances at her, noticing the way sunlight highlighted the natural sheen of her long black hair, the way her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners, and how the curve of her lips carried a quiet, teasing warmth. These small, sensory details, soft skin, graceful movements, gentle touches, heightened the slow-burning tension, deepening his fascination and desire to understand her on a level beyond the professional. Internally, he struggled with conflicting emotions. Admiration, respect, and a sense of ethical responsibility clashed with curiosity and the undeniable thrill of attraction. Each interaction became a test of self-control. A fleeting touch or lingering look could ignite feelings that he had no right to indulge in a professional setting. And yet, the more he tried to maintain distance, the more he found himself attuned to the nuanced ways she communicated, the subtle hints of connection that went beyond words. This keynote emphasizes the emotional push and pull, the tension that arises when attraction grows in a professional context. The goal is to illustrate both characters' awareness of the attraction without crossing explicit boundaries, using body language, fleeting touches, and micro-expressions to build suspense. Her mature beauty, curvy figure, long black hair, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, and expressive dark brown eyes creates a rich sensory experience for him, allowing the audience to feel the magnetic pull while understanding the ethical and emotional conflict that defines slow-burn romance. By the end of this section, tension is at a peak. The professional dynamic remains intact, but both are acutely aware that the emotional stakes have risen, leaving the audience eager to see how their connection will evolve. The tension that had been quietly building between them reached a delicate turning point one afternoon when the office was unusually empty. The 22-year-old junior employee noticed a change in her demeanor, a subtle softness in the 42-year-old American Caucasian manager with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, soft laugh lines, subtle freckles, and dark brown eyes. She had always been poised, confident, and graceful, but now there was a vulnerability in her movements, a quiet openness in the way she interacted. Her tailored blouse and skirt accentuated her mature, curvy figure, yet it was the human details, the tilt of her head, the warmth in her eyes, the gentle gestures, that drew his attention most. As he explained his approach to a complex project, she moved closer than usual, her presence enveloping him in a calm, grounding warmth. When her hand lightly rested on his forearm to guide his attention to a graph, it was no longer merely professional. It was intimate in a quiet, YouTube-safe way. He could feel the soft warmth of her skin, the subtle energy of her touch, and the emotional weight of her attention. Her eyes held his, dark brown and expressive, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. Every small detail, her slight smile, the gentle crinkle of her eyes, the confident yet unguarded posture, amplified the unspoken connection building between them. In this moment, they both allowed a sliver of vulnerability to surface. He sensed that she, too, felt the quiet tension that had been simmering for weeks, the attraction tempered by respect, experience, and awareness of the professional boundary. Her voice, softer than usual, carried a warmth and attentiveness that drew him in, creating a space where honesty and emotion could subtly emerge. Even simple interactions, a shared laugh, a brief brush of the hand, the deliberate care in her guidance, became charged with meaning. The ordinary became extraordinary through the lens of heightened awareness, each gesture carrying layers of unspoken emotion. Internally, he wrestled with his own reactions. Curiosity and admiration merged with an increasing emotional attachment. He recognized the risk in letting these feelings surface but couldn't ignore the magnetic pull she exerted, the way her mature, graceful presence commanded attention and stirred something deep within him. Her subtle freckles, soft laugh lines, and curvy figure combined with her confident, poised movements created a sensory-rich experience, each observation anchoring him further in a quiet fascination and tender longing. This keynote focuses on emotional vulnerability and the near-confession stage of a slow-burn romance. It captures how subtle touches, prolonged eye contact, and attentive gestures deepen intimacy without violating professional boundaries. The audience is invited to feel the charged atmosphere, the flutter of excitement, and the quiet tension building toward a potential emotional revelation. By the end of this section, both characters are acutely aware of the attraction, yet the connection remains restrained, simmering with anticipation for the ultimate emotional resolution in the final part. The culmination of weeks of subtle tension and quiet attraction arrived on a bright, sunlit afternoon. The office, usually filled with ambient noise and the hum of activity, had grown unusually calm, leaving the 22-year-old junior employee and the 42-year-old American Caucasian manager with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, soft laugh lines, subtle freckles, and dark brown eyes alone together. Her tailored blouse and skirt framed her curvy, graceful figure, radiating authority and elegance, yet her movements carried a gentle softness, a human vulnerability that he had come to notice and cherish. Every detail, the tilt of her head, the faint crease at the corner of her eyes when she smiled, the warmth in her voice, seemed amplified in the quiet space around them. It started with a conversation that transcended the professional. She leaned slightly closer over the table, her hand brushing lightly against his wrist as she pointed out a detail in the presentation. The warmth of her touch lingered, grounding him and sending a quiet thrill through his chest. Her gaze held his for a long moment, dark brown eyes expressive and inviting, communicating more than words could capture. A slight smile curved her lips, the subtle lines around her eyes accentuating her mature beauty, and he realized that the emotional space between them had shifted irreversibly. The restraint of professional boundaries remained, yet there was a palpable intimacy now, a recognition that their connection was both unique and profound. He felt a rush of emotions, admiration for her confidence and poise, awe at her graceful presence, and a tender longing that had been growing quietly all these weeks. She noticed his reaction, her own emotions reflected in a soft, knowing smile. The subtle touch of her fingers, the brief leaning in during conversation, the unspoken attentiveness in her tone. These gestures combined into a slow, deliberate acknowledgement of the bond that had developed. For a moment, the office felt like a private world, their personal connection set apart from the formalities and expectations that had defined their professional relationship. The culmination wasn't dramatic or overtly romantic, but it was deeply satisfying. A quiet, mutual understanding, a recognition that attraction, admiration, and emotional intimacy could exist without words or overt actions. He sensed that she, too, felt the tension transform into something warm and affirming, a bond built on respect, shared experience, and subtle gestures of care. The flutter in his chest quieted into a steady, reassuring beat, as if her presence itself offered comfort and excitement simultaneously.